So let's focus on the first man shot because I do think the other two are easier in a way. Rosenbaum is the first man Kyle shot, and he's not a good man. This was not a good man. He was causing trouble all night and chased Kyle. That much we know. It's disputed why he chased Kyle. The prosecutor's arguing it's because Kyle pointed his gun at Rosenbaum's buddy or just somebody near Rosenbaum. In any event, Rosenbaum comes to approach Kyle. Rosenbaum, it is undisputed, was unarmed. And this is what the prosecution's now seizing on. They're basically suggesting you can't shoot somebody who's unarmed. Here's, I mentioned James Krause. He did the rebuttal for the prosecution, which I thought was probably the strongest of the three arguments. Here's how he put it. Listen here.
Clearly, if there is provocation, he's guilty. But even outside of provocation, why do you get to immediately just start shooting? As Mr. Binger said, he brought a gun to a fist fight. And he was too cowardly to use his own fist to fight his way out. He has to start shooting.
Robert, can you speak to that argument?
I found it an insane argument to say that you're supposed to engage in fist fights now, to welcome fist fights, supposed to put your gun down and engage in a fist fight and see what happens. I mean, Binger actually, in his part of closing, actually said that nobody had ever died from an unarmed person. Well, we've got a couple of centuries of history that say otherwise. So I find that argument about he's just supposed to take a beating, he's supposed to put the gun down and just get into a fist fight with someone, that is the solution. It's just not a solution, and it's not one required under Wisconsin law. If you fear great bodily harm, you're entitled to use deadly force. And Kyle explained in detail, and the video shows in detail, and Richie McGinnis, probably the best witness on the Rosenbaum case for the defense, was the state's own witness, Richie McGinnis, who, when he was getting hammered on cross-examination or a direct examination, redirect by Binger, and Binger said, "You have no idea what Rosenbaum was thinking." McGinnis famously said, "Well, I know he said F you and then lunged for the gun." And that's as good a defense for Kyle as you can possibly get, because here you have a so-called complaining witness, reckless endangerment charge concerning Richie McGinnis, saying that the same thing that Kyle was saying, that this person was yelling at him, screaming at him. I think he called it a blood-curdling scream right at the time he lunged for the gun. If that isn't self-defense, then we don't have self-defense in America.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but this other guy, Ryan Balch, testified that Rosenbaum, the guy who got shot, did threaten Kyle Rittenhouse earlier in the evening. "If I get you alone, I'm going to kill you." Here's that soundbite too.
He goes, "You know what? If I catch any of you guys alone tonight, I'm going to fucking kill you."
And he said that to you?
Correct.
Did he say that to the defendant as well?
The defendant was there, so yes.
Oh, Mr. Binger. I mean, that's the prosecution bringing out that evidence, which is not good for his side. So now the prosecutor is claiming that isn't true, but that's the evidence the jury heard. So let me ask you, Dave, because I understand if it's two guys, if you're unarmed and the other guy's unarmed and he comes over and starts beating you, you should fight back with your fists. But if you've got a gun and a guy comes over and threatens you and reaches for your gun, I don't think the law considers him unarmed. I think the person who has the gun initially is allowed to factor that gun going to the other person in to the equation in deciding what kind of force to use to respond with. Am I wrong?
Yeah, well, this is what the jury is going to have to grapple with. It was Rosenbaum a real threat to Kyle Rittenhouse. And part of it, though, Megyn, is that Kyle Rittenhouse had that strap around. So that reaching for the gun would have been blocked by the strap that he used to keep the gun in his own possession. So that's another consideration. Also, the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse shot 4 times. Now, a lot's been made on the timing of the shots. Well, he shot pretty quickly. And so that's going to be the defense argument. It's like, hey, he shot enough to neutralize the threat. Whereas the prosecution's saying, well, he started to make it a little more of a thinking process, that the shots were not in as rapid fire as you would think, that he could have stopped after 1 shot, but he shot 4 times to kill a guy who was unarmed and who threw a plastic bag at him. And the other thing about lunging, the video I saw showed that there was distance, and that's what the prosecution focused on. There was enough distance between the defendant and Rosenbaum so that when Rosenbaum was shot, he was not next to Rittenhouse. There was enough distance where he couldn't have grabbed for the gun. And as he's falling after he'd been shot, that's when it looks like he lunged for the gun. And as far as the witnesses saying, hey, this guy was saying, I'm going to kill you and stuff. Yeah, he was saying a lot of things. There was another witness on the stand who described Rosenbaum as something like a blathering idiot. So he was just spewing lots of stuff. And the question is whether he was a legitimate threat to Rittenhouse's life. And
okay, but wait, can I jump in there? Let me
Mm-hmm.
ask you, is that the question, whether he was, quote, a legitimate threat to Kyle's life? Or is it more whether Kyle reasonably, given who Kyle is and his experiences, whether he reasonably believed that his life was in danger, and whether an objectively reasonable person could also see that?
Well, you look through the eyes of Kyle Rittenhouse, but you also have to look through the prism of reasonableness. So when I say legitimate, what I'm saying is that it's not just subjective on Kyle's part. You have to look at the reasonableness of it. Was it reasonable for Kyle to think that Rosenbaum, an unarmed man who threw a plastic bag at him, was going to take his gun away and then use it against him? Well, the gun was strapped to Kyle Rittenhouse. Rosenbaum wasn't right next to Rittenhouse to take the gun away, and he shot him 4 times to kill him. So that's what the jury is going to have to consider.
Mm-hmm. Robert, it's funny because when I listened to the ADA's closing, he made it sound like this was just a lovely evening at the lounge. You know, where like Kyle Rittenhouse got to sit back and it was like, maybe I'll fire a shot, maybe not. Maybe I'll fire a second one. Let me think about it. Should I fire a second shot? Oh, I think that I've injured his pelvis. I guess, I'm good. No, I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, it happened in less than seconds. He had to make these decisions. And I realize that now we know that the first shot injured the guy's pelvis, Rosenbaum's, but Kyle Rittenhouse didn't know that in the moment. Yes, he wasn't right on top of Kyle when he was coming for the gun, but you just look at the tape. You know, he was running toward him, according to Richie McGinnis, reaching for the gun, yelling, "Fuck you," and it already threatened him. And so he may not be on top of him. He may not be on top. It may not be on top of Kyle Rittenhouse in the second, but he's about to be, right? So it's like, to me, this is a 20/20 hindsight thing where it's like, sure, we could pretend he had all the time in the world, but you can see on tape he didn't.
And what was happening that night was escalating violence by the various attackers on Kyle that night. You know, it starts off with threats, with small threats. Then the threats get to be big threats. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. A lot of N-words, that kind of stuff coming from Rosenbaum. Then it escalates into throwing down porta potties. Then it escalates into putting wagons and things in the middle of the road. Then it escalates into small arsons. Then it escalates into attempted big arsons. And the ultimate goal was it was going to escalate into killing Kyle Rittenhouse. Because what happens is he's walking down there, and as there was testimony from the state's own witnesses, where Rosenbaum was, he was right behind 2 cars waiting for Rittenhouse to come by, and then he springs free. And then you have Zeminski threatening him on one side, Rosenbaum threatening him on another side. And as to the issue of provocation, as an example, there is no evidence he lifted his gun. The compelling evidence is he didn't. But even if anyone believed that, you are allowed under Wisconsin law to withdraw and give notice of it. I call it like Leonard Skinner's "Give me 3 steps." Kyle does that 3 different times before he shoots Rosenbaum. First, he tries to step back and go back up Sheridan Road, but he's blocked by the other people. So that's attempt number 1. And Rosenbaum runs at him instead of withdrawing. 2, he tries to run across the parking lot, at which point he hears a gunshot behind him and sees the bag thrown at him, turns around and points at Rosenbaum, gives Rosenbaum a second chance to withdraw because he turns around and runs away again. And then the third time is right by the cars where he's completely trapped. He's got Zeminski behind him. He's got Rosenbaum about to attack him. He's got a riotous crowd right in front of him. He's stuck between 4 cars. He turns around and he doesn't fire right away. He waits to see what Rosenbaum does. And what does Rosenbaum do? He yells, "F you," and lunges for the gun, according to Richie McGinnis, independent testimony, who was live and can see it live. We don't have to rely on drone footage from miles away. We have Richie McGinnis seeing it live in live time. And that is compelling evidence that he gave 3 opportunities for Rosenbaum to withdraw. He gave notice and had himself withdrawn and retreated. So even if anybody believed provocation, the state cannot prove that aspect, which they also have to prove in order to prove him guilty of any crime related to Rosenbaum.